In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through this natural looking outdoor portrait retouch step by step. Hi there, Michael Volshinovich here. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/vibrantshot. So in this first of a two-part series, we're going to be retouching this outdoor portrait that I shot, and we're going to be giving it a nice summery feel while maintaining sort of a natural look to it. Now in this part, we're going to focus on cleaning up shadows and tonal changes with frequency separation, and then we're going to add contrast with dodging and burning. In part 2, we'll look at styling the photo a bit with a variety of tonal adjustments, adding some of the bokeh that you see here, and also we're going to be doing some sharpening and working on details like eyes and hair. So I've obviously already retouched this photo, and this is more or less the look we're going to be after. And I think a lot of us, we get started in portrait photography and we get a little bit stumped as to why our photos don't quite look as good as some of those of the best portrait photographers out there. And we begin to believe that there's some magical in-camera technique that we haven't yet mastered. And while it's true that lighting, model, makeup, composition, they all play a huge part in a great portrait, but it's often the quality of the retouch that will take your photos to the next level and really allow you to put your own stamp on it. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we have our original image, and where I want to start with is I'm not a big fan of this sort of white space that we have over here because of the hair parting and showing the sweater. So I do want to get rid of that, and so to do that, what I basically did was I'm going to skip the step essentially to save a bit of time. But I shot a number of photos in this series, and so I found one where the lighting fell on the hair in a similar manner, and I basically looked for one where the chunk was big enough to cover this area. So once I found that photo, essentially all I did was I cut out the hair and I brought it into here. So now we see that this doesn't look terribly good. So what we need to do is we need to make some adjustments to this in order to make it actually fit into the frame and make it look like we didn't just paste it in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command L, and we're going to bring up our levels adjustment. What I want to do is I want to just kind of bring the brightness of this to match the rest of the hair here. So I think we do need to brighten it up a little bit, maybe to around this point here. And then what I need to do is I'm going to just bring in a mask, and I'm just going to kind of blend this together a little bit better. So we're just going to add a mask. I'm going to zoom in there a little bit and bring in our black brush at a fairly low flow rate, anywhere around 10 or 15% should be quite fine. And we're just going to brush in through here just to kind of blend that all together. And as you can see, it really doesn't take much, just some very quick blending here, and we've got something that looks pretty good. So sometimes you will have to go back and paint certain areas back in just to make them look a little bit better. And again, this is not an exact science. You don't really have to worry about it too much, because ultimately nobody's going to be looking at this through a magnifying glass. So just kind of blending it so that it looks pretty good and there are no sharp edges. So I think if we zoom out, that's pretty good. If you didn't know that was there, you probably wouldn't notice. So that looks good to me. Now the next thing we're going to have to focus on is some of the skin adjustments. And with today's cameras shooting at 36 megapixels and us using ultra sharp prime lenses, no matter how gorgeous your model, there's always going to be some skin cleaning and tonal smoothing that we need to do. And so that's where we're going to go next. So to make tonal changes or brightness changes to certain areas of the skin, I almost always use frequency separation. And I'll do that on just about every portrait that I retouch. Now, I have covered frequency separation in a previous video where we changed some of the makeup on a model. So I do encourage you to look back at that video for a little bit more information on the subject. And we do also have a good series of photos on individual retouching techniques. So I do encourage you to look back at those and just kind of view this video as a helper to put all of those together. So if you want more detail on individual subjects, definitely refer to those videos, as we're only going to be just kind of touching on the subjects. I'm not going to be going into as much depth as I did on the other videos. So going back to frequency separation, really straightforward technique, but it basically just takes a bit of practice to get used to it and to get good at it. Really, as with anything with retouching. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a stamp visible layer so that we can put this hair that we inserted in on its own layer. So I'm going to do that by hitting Command Option Shift E, and that's going to create a stamp visible layer for us. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that twice. So I'm going to hit Command J twice with that layer selected. And then I'm going to name this one high, and I'm going to name this one low. And by the way, frequency separation is a great candidate for an action. So you can record this as an action, and you don't have to go through the process of doing it every single time. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And usually when I'm blurring for frequency separation, I'm in the 8 to 10 pixel radius range. Now what I usually tend to do, because obviously this will vary with the resolution of your camera, what I tend to do is just look at a blur radius that takes away most of the detail. So for example, if I look at the eyelashes here, I want to really not be able to see the details of those eyelashes. I just kind of want the tone of them. So to achieve that, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So right now 8.5 seems to give me that effect that I like. So I'm going to click OK. That's going to blur that out. And then we're going to go into our high layer, and we're going to change that to linear light. And then we're going to go to Image, Apply Image. As our source, we're going to select our low layer. We're going to check off Invert, and we're going to make sure that the blending mode is selected as Add. Scale should be 2, offset should be 0. Now the values are different if you are working with an 8-bit image. These are the settings for a 16-bit image. The values are posted along with my video on frequency separation for changing makeup. So do refer to that one on my blog, and I'll provide a link to it at the bottom of this video. So we're going to click OK. And basically what we've done now is we separated out the image into two parts. One, which is a high frequency detail essentially in the image, and that's this high layer. And then our low frequency, as we can see, is this blurred layer. And that blurred layer really is just all of the tonal values of our image. So now that we have that, what I tend to do is just group these together into something called frequency separation or whatever. I'm just going to call this FS for short. We're going to create a new layer in there. And what you want to do is you want to select a brush that is very soft, so you want to make sure that you are at 0 hardness. And then blend mode is normal. Flow rate is going to be around 14%. Sorry about that. Flow rate is going to be at 5%. And we're just going to zoom in here. And what we're really trying to achieve with frequency separation is we're just trying to smooth out some of these changes in tone. So as we can see, we've got this abrupt change from a light skin tone to a darker one, and that's most likely just a shadow kind of going through here because of this hair, but we don't really want to see that. And then just kind of evening out some of the tones here, and lightening under the eyes, evening out the tone here. So usually it's due with lighting, and then in the case of some models, they may need more skin retouching, so it becomes very useful for just changing out any sort of pigmentation that may be in the face. So in this case, we're really just kind of fixing issues because of the way light is falling. So what we need to do is sample our colors, and we're just going to kind of paint back and forth on both sides of where the change happens. So we're going to sample the dark color and paint on the lighter side, and then we're going to sample the lighter color and paint on the darker side. So we're going to shrink our brush a little bit here. I'm just going to select this lighter tone, and I'm going to start brushing. And you know what? Actually, that flow rate is a little too high for me. I'm probably going to stick to somewhere around flow rate of 3. And God help you adjusting that when you're using a Wacom tablet. Now, speaking of a Wacom tablet, it's definitely going to help you to have one when you're doing this as well as dodging and burning. So I highly recommend one. Otherwise, it's a lot more difficult to do, and it's going to take a lot more time, and it's not going to give you quite as nice a result. So now that we've got our lighter color sample, I'm just going to start painting in here a little bit, and we're going to kind of sample back and forth around the various areas here. And it's important to sample often because we don't want to kind of get to the point where we've created a color out of the blue that just doesn't feel like it fits. So we've got a little bit of redness here. I just want to carry that across. And what we're always trying to do is make sure that we're not changing color drastically. And also anytime there's shadows under eyes or something along those lines, frequency separation is great for getting rid of that. And so now we're going to kind of work on this cheek area here. So we're going to bring in some of the darker color up, and then we're going to bring in some of the lighter color down. I'm going to just kind of lighten this transition here. And as you can see, I'm just sampling on both sides and just brushing over top. So we're always just trying to kind of smooth these tones out wherever we see that there's, a little bit of patchiness. We're just trying to make that flow in, so to make the two tones flow together. And as you may have seen in that video where I'm changing the makeup color and essentially replacing it with skin tone, this can be really effective for a number of applications. So it's not just for smoothing out skin. Anytime you need to make changes to the color without actually modifying the texture of the skin, it's a great thing to use. Now, some people do this using clone stamp tool, and I don't really like doing that because I find that you just get a lot more control using a brush, because with clone stamp tool you're always sampling some of the different areas, and for whatever reason I find it never really works out as well. So just keep sampling often and only work on small areas at a time, and that tends to produce the best result, or at least it does for me anyways. Let's see where else we want to do this. So in here, see these little areas here where we got a little bit of red here and then a slightly lighter skin tone. We just want to even that all out. And that again is just a mixture of bringing in some of the darks on top of the lights and bringing in some of the lighter tone on top of the darker tone. And again, I'm doing this all on its own layer. So if there's anything I don't like, it's completely non-destructive. I can just mask it out or start from scratch without actually having to redo this whole frequency separation. Now again, here we've got some slightly lighter tone, so we're just going to cover that up. We're going to want to smooth this transition here. This spot feels a little dark for me, and one thing that's important to do is to kind of zoom out a little bit and work from farther out, because if you work too close then you focus on the texture too much. Now when we zoom out we see that this spot looks a little bit too light, and so for that reason I'm going to just start working on that spot there, bringing in some of this darker color here just to make that a little bit smoother. Now this feels a little too dark to me, so I'm going to lighten that spot out. Still going to lighten under the eye a little bit more. And again, sampling often and taking short strokes. And now I'm going to lighten this area. For that I'm going to take a slightly larger brush, and we're just going to kind of transition through here, just making that transition nice and smooth. And now here we see that there is a little bit of tonal change right in this area. So again, we're going to do the same thing, just trying to match that up. Just sampling from all around, brushing in. I'm not using any sort of pressure sensitivity on my Wacom tablet. I'm just using one fixed hardness. For this I find that pressure sensitivity is not terribly helpful. In fact, it just makes things a little bit more difficult. And so I think we're making good progress here. Now, any sort of fine grain changes, like for example, any sort of minor areas that we want to change, that you're not going to be able to do under this particular blur radius, because essentially we're going to be focusing on larger areas here. So if there's a really small detail that you want to cover up, you're not going to be able to do that. You can either do that afterwards using spot healing or just the healing brush, or even clone stamp tool. Now, one thing that is important to keep in mind is I haven't done any sort of actual small blemish removal on this portrait, just because she doesn't actually need it. But if we were to do that, so if you had lots of acne, you would have to go through the image first. Just on this stamp visible layer that we have here, you would go through it and essentially use those tools, clone stamp tool, spot healing tool, to just get rid of those smaller blemishes. Anything bigger like I said, tonal changes, that we leave for the frequency separation, but any sort of minor things like blemish removal, you would do that before you do your frequency separation. And I don't think there's any need for me to demo that, just because it's about as easy as you get. You just get the spot removal tool and you brush over anywhere where there's acne, or you use the clone stamp tool, which I will do sometimes, but I'll generally try and use it at a very high opacity, so like even 100%, just because I want to make sure I don't get rid of any skin texture. So where possible, use the healing brush and spot healing brush, and if that fails, go with the clone stamp tool. So we're assuming that we've already done that, and now we're doing our frequency separation. So let's just get back to that. And let's see kind of where we've come so far. So if we toggle this on and off, we see that the changes we were making seemed really subtle at the time, but they're actually producing quite a drastic result. Now this just feels a little too dark to me now, so I can just go back and fix that up a little bit. So I'm just going to blend from the nose a little bit more here, just like that. Again, it feels like subtle changes, but it does add up to a lot. Now this spot under the eye, I think there is a little bit too much transition. Again, that's just simple shadow caused by the light hitting the eyebrow. So we're just going to pick an adequate brush size. We're going to make it actually pretty small. We just want to smooth out this transition again. So I'm just going to do a couple of strokes there, a couple strokes above, and again, and above. There we go. So we want to preserve some degree of shadow, but we just want to make it even. The shadow we can always build back up later when we're doing our dodging and burning. So it's really not a matter of getting it perfect in terms of it being light or dark enough. What we're really trying to do is just make it smooth with the rest. So we just want a clean blend between the lighter and darker area. We're going to look at this area here a little bit. So let's just sample our colors. Just again focusing on getting nice clean transitions. And this area still feels a little bit too light to me, so I'm just going to sample some darker colors. And then I'm also going to sample lighter colors and brush them into here. And as I said, I'm never really too concerned about actually replacing dodging and burning with this. I don't really want to add, create a darker color in here to add, some more contrast or create darker colors on the eyes. I'm only focused on smoothing out the colors, just making them blend nicely and getting rid of any sort of patchiness that may exist. So we're just smoothing out some of these areas over here. And normally I would probably spend anywhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 minutes on this process. If it's a beauty shot, then I may spend 20 minutes. And it all again depends on how good the skin is on your model. In this case, again, like I said, we're really just changing very minor tonal sharp tonal changes and some shadowing that has happened because of light going through hair and things like that. But if your model doesn't have terribly good skin, it can take a little while just to even all of that out. But the great thing about this technique is you can even it all out without turning your photo into a complete blurry mess. So I think we're getting pretty close here. Normally I would spend maybe just a little bit longer to really perfect this, but in this case, I don't want to bore you to death and have you watch me do this for 20 minutes. So we're going to move on shortly. Just going to put some final finishing touches on this, and we can move on to the dodging and burning stage. Let's just zoom out to check and see how we're looking. And I think we're pretty good, just maybe under these eyes here. I don't like this transition between here, 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 and here, so let's just do something about that. I think that needs to go maybe a little bit lighter. Just again, sampling from both sides, top, bottom. and that, I think, did the trick. Now I'm actually going to bring a little bit of this reddish color down on the cheek here. And we can burn that in a little bit more later as well, but I'm just going to do it now. And this area still feels a little too light up here. Remember, the undo is your friend. Sometimes you'll just make a mistake and you don't think it looks good. So just go back and undo it. Alright, so I think we've got a nice smooth color gradation going across the forehead here. I think the cheeks are looking pretty nice. So I think we're ready to move on. And if we toggle this on and off, we see that this is where we come with, not too much time. So now we're ready to move on to our dodging and burning. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to create a stamp visible layer of this again. So Command Option Shift E will capture all of our frequency separation onto a brand new layer. And so if we just toggle this on and off, we see that this has all of the adjustments that we made. So now I'm going to, for the frequency separation, I do again have a video that goes into more detail on the subject, as well as providing you with basically 3 or 4 different ways of doing dodge and burning, so you can find which way works for you. Now in this case, I'm going to use the curves adjustment approach to dodging and burning. So to do that, we're essentially going to create a new group. We're going to just call that dodge burn dB, and we're going to add 2 curves adjustments to it. So the first one is going to be our dodge layer. So we're just going to bring up our curve at the midpoint. And we're going to hit Command I to basically disable it. So we're going to just fill our mask in with black. And we're just going to name that dodge. Now again, I have an action that creates these for me. So I don't have to do them manually every time. But I just wanted to take you through the process of doing it manually. Now I'm going to change the blend mode to luminosity, and the reason I do that is that as you actually change the brightness of a particular area, it will also affect the saturation of that area. So if we just change it to luminosity, all we're doing is we're lightening and darkening, but the actual color should stay the same. So now the next thing we're going to do is create our burn layer. So again, we're going to create, not a levels adjustment, we want a curves adjustment. So this one is going to go down, and again we're going to hit Command Inverse to essentially black that out. That's going to be our burn layer. And so with dodging and burning, basically the main goal is to essentially add sharpness to the face by adding contrast. So we're going to be adding contrast selectively in certain areas. And again, dodging and burning, much like the frequency separation that we did, it's really just a matter of experimentation and just doing it over and over again to find what works well and where you should be dodging, where you should be burning, and just kind of refining that technique. So while you're going to watch me do this, you're going to kind of get the idea of what you're doing. It's just going to take practice to get to the point where the image looks really good. So again, we're just going to use a brush. It's going to be a white brush, and usually I do my dodging and burning in and around 3 to 5% flow. Now, for dodging and burning, sometimes I'll use flow, but usually I will actually use opacity because I do want to make sure that I don't have any sort of lighter and darker areas. Because essentially, what happens is if we create a new blank layer over here, let's just say I fill this layer here with black. And then I take a white brush. So if I use opacity and I go like this, where are we here? Paintbrush. Let me just increase our opacity there a little bit. So if I go like that, you see we've got a smooth line. Now if I instead I use my flow at 40% and I do the same thing, you see that at the junction point it's just a little bit brighter, right? So flow kind of just adds a little bit more, whereas opacity will create a smoother kind of tonal change around any sort of areas that we're changing direction. So for dodging and burning, I find that it works a little bit better. So let's just get rid of that layer and go back here, and we're going to take our flow up to 100%, opacity to around 5%. So basically with dodging and burning, one thing that we're going to do in the next video is we're going to look at dodging and burning the hair and things like eyebrows to really make those pop. We're also going to do some dodging and burning within the eyes. So that's going to be when we actually sort of tackle some of the details. Right now we're looking at dodging and burning in sort of a more global sense. So before I do that, I think what I'm going to do is I really wanted to draw more attention to this part of the face and then just kind of let some of this background stuff melt away a little bit. So before I actually start my dodging and burning, I think I want to make that tonal adjustment first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, create another curves adjustment, and we're going to bring that down to somewhere around there. So as you can see, we've essentially darkened everything, but what I want to do is I want to exclude this general area here. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to create an elliptical selection around this. So I'm just going to start going from here. I'm going to hit Option so it goes from the center, and then I'm going to create an ellipse that looks something like that. And then we're going to right click that and we're going to say Transform Selection. We're going to rotate that selection and kind of just shift it into place here. So that's pretty much where I want to see it. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hit Enter, and then we're going to go to Refine Edge, and we want to just feather this up a little bit because we want this to be a fairly smooth transition. And now what we can do is we can fill with our background color, which is black. So if we hit Command Delete, that's going to basically create an exclusion there. So we can just deselect that. Now if we just toggle this on and off, you see that's sort of like this this vignetted look that we're getting there. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to kind of take it out of certain areas. So I don't think I want to darken down here because it looks a little bit unnatural. And I also want to bring back the lightness around the eye because I think now we're making this eye a little too dark. So basically I'm just going to grab my brush here, and we're at 5% here, so we're just going to brush that in with black just to make sure that this down here is excluded. And we're going to get into the eye here. Again, we're painting with a black brush, not a white one, because we want to exclude that curves adjustment from these areas. So let's just see how we're doing there. We actually want to bring our opacity up a little bit because otherwise we're going to be here all day trying to exclude these areas. So let's see how we're looking there. That's getting a little bit better. I still want to exclude that a little more and just take care of that eye as well. And now I'm just going to bring this up and just make a quick little stroke around the cheek, just because again I do want this to pop just a little bit more. So I think that's pretty good. Now I think I've done a little too much exclusion under the eye here, so I'm just going to paint that back in white with a small brush because I want to make sure that that skin tone is consistent through there. And I'll probably dodge and burn that a little bit more as we go as well. So I think that's pretty good. We're pretty much black there. Let's just give that a little bit more fill right in the eye. Okay. So now that I made that adjustment, and I wanted to do that before I do my dodging and burning because otherwise it really does kind of change the feel of the image. So I want to make sure that I'm not over burning on this side if I'm already going to be darkening it anyways. So we've got that that out of the way. Let's just go back into our dodge and burn. So I'm going to start with burn. It doesn't really matter which one you start with, but I tend to start with burning as opposed to dodging. That's just my preference, but whatever works for you. So where I'm going to start in is, usually I'll start with the outsides of the face, so I'll just kind of burn in some of these areas here, because that creates a more kind of three-dimensional effect to the face. So we're just going to burn in here, and we are painting with black, so that's doing absolutely nothing. So let's make sure we select white as our color first before we start doing this. And you know how many strokes you need to make and how much you need to burn, that really just comes with experience. Again, just kind of playing around. Now, if I was doing a beauty shot, I would probably be dodging and burning much more aggressively than I am here. Again, our focus in this image is to keep it looking fairly natural. We don't want to kind of overdo things. So we're not going to be going crazy with the dodging and burning. We're going to keep it fairly simple. So as you can see, I'm basically right now going over areas that are already, in shadow, and I'm just kind of deepening some of those shadows there just to really frame the face. And we're going to be working on the eyes a little bit more once we get into part 2. So now if the hair wasn't here, for example, this is one area where you're commonly going to burn a lot. Like right in there, you want to define that cheekbone. In this case, we have this hair covering it, so we're not going to do too much there. I think I've actually burned a little too much in that side, so we're going to take that back out. One area where I will often burn as well is inside the lip. So right at the top of the lip, you may want to do some burning just to help kind of define that. And again, it's fairly subtle. You don't want to overdo it. And it may feel like you're not really doing much here, but as you toggle on and off, you'll see that it does actually make a bit of a difference. And so we're just going to bring that little shadow out there. I often do like to amplify the shadows around the nose. And I just want to bring down the lightness here under the eye a little bit, just because it feels a little too bright to me. I try not to fix too many tonal gaps with dodging and burning. That's what the frequency separation was for. But, I'll be honest, sometimes I do, because you do miss things, and sometimes they're just a little bit easier to fill using dodging and burning. So try and keep it to a minimum, but if you need to do it, nobody will ever know. And so, dodging and burning, it's one of those things that do really take your portrait up a level. Once you get really good at it, it can make a really big difference in terms of how your images look. So it's definitely something that's worth practicing and just trying to get as good at as you can. So now I'm actually off to the dodge portion of it. I may come back to burning, and we definitely will once we start working on some of these details. But for now, we're just going to dodge inside the lips here a little bit, just to make those portions brighter. So basically we're darkening on the outside, lightening somewhat in the inside, and now typically on the lips, you will get this little light outline above the lips, and you do want to actually punch that up a little bit. Not too much, because then it just looks silly. In here we see that naturally she does have that, because she's just got great features. So some of these things just come out naturally, but in these areas here where it's a little bit darker, we can just help to bring that out a little bit more. And again, you don't want to make it look fake, so don't overdo it. And let's see what else. Sometimes I would dodge in the nose here a little bit, but we do have a pretty good highlight going already, so I'm not going to dodge too much in there. The chin is one area where I'll sometimes dodge a little bit. Sometimes under the eyes, if you want to lighten under there, if you're not doing frequency separation, maybe you're in a hurry and it's just a portrait that you're not getting paid enough to do the frequency separation on, very quickly you can kind of fix some of the darker spots under eyes with just doing this sort of dodging and burning under them. But in this case, we fixed most of all of this stuff using our frequency separation, so there's not much to be done there. I'm just going to lighten that cheekbone a little bit just to make it come out a little bit. Again, give it more depth and dimension. And I think I'm pretty happy with where we are on the dodging and burning. Again, if this was a studio portrait, the light would probably be more contrasty, and we'd be going for a more sort of polished look, whereas here again we're trying to keep it more natural, so I don't want to at any point overdo the dodging and burning. So we're pretty close to being done with it here on this particular shot, and then in part 2 we're going to be dealing with those details. Now, don't forget about things like the neck as well. We can do a little bit of dodging in there just to help define some of this here. So I'm just going to dodge that a little bit, this as well. And you'll see when we start working on the details like the eyes and the hair, that's where I would spend a fair bit of time on a shot like this. Just going to burn in here a little bit more. Again, I just want to amplify some of the shadowing on this side of the face here. Alright, so again, when you do this, you want to kind of do it at various different zoom levels, because you don't want to be focusing just on texture and get caught up on that, and then when you zoom out you realize it doesn't quite look right. So when you zoom out, you can zoom out even to this very small level and see, does it look good at a thumbnail level? And to me, at this level, I think we could darken a little bit up there and maybe even lighten a little bit on this side. So let's go ahead and do that. And I think that looks pretty good. So like I said, again, just make sure you experiment with different zoom levels just to make sure that everything looks good. So if we now toggle this dodging and burning on and off, we see that the change is fairly subtle. Again, let's do that at a couple of different zoom levels, but here we just see that we're just adding a little bit more depth to the face, right? Here it's somewhat flat. It's not bad, but when we kind of go to this, we see that everything is just tied together. We've kind of taken care of some of these changes in tone, which we really should have done with frequency separation, but things happen. So I think that looks good. Again, if this was a studio portrait or a beauty shot or something along those lines, we'd probably go a little bit further with this. So now that we're done it on the face itself, then in part 2 we're going to be looking at doing this on the details, and that's really going to make things pop as well. Once we start bringing out these hair highlights, darkening up the eyebrows, bringing out some light inside the eyes, that's when you'll see a much bigger impact from it as well. So part 2 will be available within about a week or so, or if you're watching this long after it's been recorded, then it's probably already available, in which case there will be a link to part 2 right below this video. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel just to make sure you don't miss any future videos, and also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/vibrantshot. Bye for now.